You're listening to the Practical Wealth Show with Curtis May.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Practical Wealth Show. So I have Mr. Ryan Condie today, and Ryan is an acquisition specialist for business. I'm going to let him tell you a little about yourself, but he's referred to me by a good friend of mine, and I am excited because y'all know my favorite topic is business. All right. So Ryan, tell him, let's get started, and then tell him what I didn't tell him, and let's show him how to make some money.
Awesome. I like that. Let's show them how to make some money. So yeah, my name is Ryan Condie. Thanks for having me, Curtis. I'm thrilled to be on your podcast, Practical Wealth. So yeah, a little bit of background about me. I've done pretty much everything you could do from an entrepreneur standpoint. I spent 8 years in enterprise software sales. And then, kind of left corporate America. I've started several companies. Some were e-commerce brands. Some were really terrible companies that I like to forget about. Some weren't very good. In 2014, I started a candy factory from scratch and built that up. We got to about 700 wholesale retail accounts in 12 months. And I realized pretty quickly, Curtis, that my skill set was not in motivating 35 employees and running the operations of a complicated factory. And so I moved on from that. That business is now in Sam's Club and Costco and many other things. And then I went back to my roots of online businesses. So I bought my first online business in 2012. It was a website that sold polyester wallets made out of old polyester ties. And I kind of stumbled upon that business and liked what I saw and reached out to the owner to see if I could buy him, because I had this crazy idea that I could improve the business. And of course he said no, Curtis. And, I kept calling him for every 2 weeks for 3 months. And eventually he said, yes, let's sell the business and let's do this. And you seem like the one with the most amount of energy. So that was kind of my first foray into buying a business. And I probably started 8 businesses and only 2 of them were successful, Curtis. And so over the last couple of years, I've really switched more into the acquisition space because I've made 4 acquisitions in my short career and continue to look for more acquisitions. But that's where I like to hang out. And I say, great, starting a business is great, but you don't have product market fit, you don't have customers, and you don't have any profit. All the things you need to, be in business. And so a lot of times you can actually jumpstart the first 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and actually acquire a business. And whether that's online or offline, but that's kind of my story in a nutshell.
That's awesome. So I've heard about, and I've spoken to business brokers that have buy this ABHC company and this or that, but I'm not that familiar with buying, like the business is purely online, like a website, fulfillment, and that kind of stuff and so talk about that and maybe what opportunities, how would you do that? Okay. Yeah. And then what are the opportunities with that? That's fascinating to me.
So I'll walk through maybe the offline first and then dive into the online. Offline, your typical service-based company or your retail store, or, it could be the laundromat or whatever that looks like, right? Everybody has people servicing, lawn care, whatever it is in their county and in their city, right? There's a lot of ways to structure those deals. One of and a lot of times when I tell people, if you're looking to acquire a company, you should start with your end in mind. Where do you want to be in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? And what type of problems do you want to solve? And so I learned pretty quickly that I was not very good at brick and mortar, because I went and did that. I did the wholesale side of things. And then I also, I live in Salt Lake City. I'm a few minutes from Park City. I got world-class mountains and skiing and trails. And I just decided I love Salt Lake City and I didn't want to move. Right. And so that kind of led me from looking at a lot of great offline businesses, but I just didn't necessarily want to move my family. So then I switched to online. And so some of the benefits that I'm going to talk about for online are really more geared towards my own lifestyle. And so I want, your listeners to be aware that when I kind of going to talk probably more about the online side of businesses, but that's just because that fits my lifestyle. Right. Everybody has their own lifestyle and their own goals that they're trying to focus on. And I have some friends that have been wildly successful by acquiring, your local service company or brick and mortar type businesses, or, I have friends who've done really well with franchising. So those are all things that I've gone down all the different paths. When I started to shift over to online, I was more for the lifestyle side of it too, Curtis. Is with an online business, you can typically move the business from San Francisco to Philly, or from Philly to Miami, or Miami to Salt Lake City. And it's pretty easy to do that. Whereas an offline business, if you've got, $1 million or $2 million a year landscape business in Seattle, you can't really move it to LA and still have the same clientele.
No.
So from an online standpoint, there's all different types of online businesses. There's e-commerce, which is you're selling physical goods. There's drop shipping, which is you're selling a physical good, but you don't have it in possession. There's content sites. A really good example would be, a content site would be any newspaper site or about.com or any site that has ads on there. You have content on there and ads are being showed there. You have affiliate sites where a lot of times on those content sites, you'll have links that says, hey, check out these top 10 products on Amazon. If you click on it, they might make a small commission. There's also software companies. You hear SaaS, software as a service. That's a really common play. There's all these different types of businesses. And depending upon what your skill set is and what your comfort level it is, that's why I typically recommend going down the path that makes the most sense for you, Curtis. So like in your example, like if you're looking for a business to buy, you would want to see something that's complementary to your business or your current skill set.
Yes.
A little bit ago, I looked at a business that it was a great restaurant. It was franchised. It was going to be fantastic. But my wife, right before I kind of pulled the trigger, said, hey, do you really want to solve a bunch of problems that are, 16-year-olds? And I was like, well, not really. That's not my skill set. That's not what I want to do. And so you're trying to find businesses that need your skill set to grow them. And then it helps narrow down. So you're not looking at e-commerce companies on one side and then lawn care companies over here, and then a tow truck company over there. You start with your skill sets and what you want to do and what you feel comfortable with. And then you start going down that path of saying, I know how to solve those problems and I want to solve those problems. And that's a great way to approach, as you're looking around, looking for a business to buy.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. So let's go back to the first acquisition. You saw it, the wallet company. And so is it safe to assume you thought your skill set was marketing or client acquisition or e-marketing, like not e-marketing, what do you call it?
Like e-commerce. Yeah.
E-commerce, right. How did you feel you could grow to that? And how do people feel what their skill sets are, or better, what skill sets should they have to begin thinking about?
That's a great question. I think, Curtis, with that one in mind, I didn't have any skill sets, but I knew it wasn't very big. And so it wasn't a huge risk. And so to me, it wasn't a huge risk, but I had a lot of ideas on how to grow it. And so I'm a big proponent of, you don't have to go buy a $10 million business, right? You can start small. I made 1 million mistakes on that business and I still 4X'd that business in the first 12 months. Wow. But I was able to kind of cut my teeth on it and learn. And so anytime you are looking at a business, I always say you need to have 8 to 10 ideas to actually know how to grow that business, because 8 of them aren't going to work. One of them might be okay, and one of them is going to work. But if you only come in with 3 or 4 ideas how to grow that business, it's not enough. You need to have 8 to 10 big ideas, because most of them won't work. And so that's kind of how I approached that first deal. Is I had a bunch of ideas how to grow it. Now, this kind of leads into, talking about skill sets, right? And a lot of it is, if you look at your past career, what have you done? What is interesting to you? And naturally, there's going to be a lot of parts of businesses that you don't understand. Like, I've run e-commerce companies since 2012, right? 8-9 years. There's still so much complexity in the e-commerce world that I don't understand, or that I'm not very good at, right? And so you're constantly learning. It's not that you have to know everything to the T of how to run that business, but there have to be areas that you feel comfortable with, especially on the growth side. On my last acquisition last year, I bought a company that was very technical, had a code base. It was custom code. I am not a developer, right? So, what does that mean for me? Well, it means for me, I can't make any changes to the actual product. So I went out, tapped into my network. One of my close friends is a developer, and he knew I was looking for a business to acquire at that time. And I sent him this business and said, hey, what do you think of this business? And he loved it. And I said, great, let's go in, let's be partners. We've worked together before. Basically brought him as the CTO and me as the CEO and him as the CTO. And so that's like an example of, you're not going to know how to do everything and know how to solve every problem, but you want to be able to tap into your network, and where it makes sense, you partner. Where it makes sense, you hire the right people. So I think there's 2 parts. You're never going to know everything, but there is some portion where you just have to know the ins and outs of that particular business. And so if you've never done e-commerce before, I would recommend either starting small or starting an even e-commerce company yourself from the scratch, and you'll learn how to build a Shopify website. You'll learn how to set up your Facebook campaigns. And you won't be very good at any of those things, but going through the reps, you'll start to learn those things and start to identify which pieces you should hire out and which ones you shouldn't. So I think that's actually a clear path for a lot of people to start small where the stakes aren't very big. And then as their skill set increases, they can make that jump to a larger acquisition or a larger business or grow that business to a larger business.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, somebody told, I think Emerson, Emerson said, if you want the power, you have to do the thing. And, I always translate that to this. Somebody told me a long time in the financial services business, like, listen, activity produces knowledge. Knowledge does not produce activity. So sometimes you can get paralysis analysis. And don't do anything. So just, start small and get in and you can't learn how to swim by reading a book, right? But you don't need to acquire $1 million business. Like you can start with, what are some of the lower end things that people could start with, and how would they begin to research that or find them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of it comes down to when you're acquiring a business or starting a business or anything business related, it's, what comfort level is your own risk? Yeah. And I would say, if it's keeping you up at night, it's probably too risky for your blood, right? Like it's probably not the best fit. Whereas if some people are just way more comfortable or their spouses are more comfortable with risk. And so when you're approaching this, you can start at any level, right? I know people who walk in and buy a $3 million company and other people who walk in and buy a $10,000 company, right? So let's start. Maybe your question first is how, where can we find some businesses on the smaller end, right? Yeah. And there's going to be some great sites, and we can link to all these here in the show notes, but some of the ones are motioninvest.com, microacquire.com, empireflippers.com. These are all sites that will typically have in anywhere from $5,000 to $50,000 websites, right? Mm-hmm. These are all e-commerce content, mainly online businesses. Now, as you get to the next tier, you go a little bit higher. There's quietlight.com. There is FE International. That's Frank E as in Empire, international.com, FE International. There's a few others, right? There's websiteclosers.com as you get into the higher end, right? So there's a lot of these marketplaces are out there. And what I typically recommend, Curtis, is at the beginning, start to look at a bunch of companies, start to look around and say, okay, I like these ones and I don't like these ones. So you're kind of looking at a little bit of everything. And then you can start to kind of pare it down a little bit and say, hey, I've looked at a bunch of companies over the last 30 days or 60 days. Now I'm really interested in companies in this industry or companies that have this type of business model. So then you can really start to focus in, because if you go look out for companies and you're scrolling through your phone, like, on bizbuysell.com and it's like Instagram or something at 10:30 at night as you're lying in bed, you'll never find a company, right? Okay. You actually have to set aside time and approach it as you would any other professional project rather than, scrolling through stuff on Instagram.
Are these businesses for sale, or you're just looking at them? Are they actually for sale? Like you call the guy, he wasn't thinking about selling, but he decided he wanted to sell.
So those ones I mentioned are marketplaces, right? Those are all businesses they're going to have listed there that they're going to be for sale. Okay. There also is the world of you could just, everything's for sale, right? And I know it's kind of cliche to think that, but for the right price. And sometimes you look around and it's not that all bad. It's not that every business for sale is bad. It's that entrepreneurs have different energy life cycles with different projects. And sometimes you're super motivated. And I sold the company 18 months ago. I'd been running it for 5.5 years. And I just was ready to move on. It wasn't a bad business. It was very profitable and a great business. But for me, I had run out of energy for that particular business. And, I think we're in a day and age where you're not going to work for the same company for your whole career. You're probably not going to run the same business for your whole career. So when you're, So anyway, so as you're approaching looking for that business, those are websites that are actually for sale. The other path is reach out directly to an owner, right? That's a completely different strategy, Curtis. Yeah. It can be a much higher quality outreach, but your success rate is incredibly low. I got super lucky that the first business I reached out to happened to be for sale. That's not normal. So the one thing I recommend, if people are doing direct outreach, you can waste a lot of time doing direct outreach. You just want to be careful, right? Because a lot of times that business owner isn't prepped to sell their business. Their books aren't in order, or another common one is they think their business is going to be valued at 20x profit, and it's not anywhere near that. So, or they get up to the 11th hour, you're about to sign the docs, and they realize, well, I have to pay taxes on the sale of the business. Well, yeah, you have to pay taxes. This is America. You got to pay taxes everywhere. So those are some things that I would think about, and maybe kind of that goes in line with this, Curtis. We've kind of been talking about more online businesses. Offline businesses kind of follow a similar suit, right? And how you value these online businesses or offline businesses is you're typically looking at the trailing 12 months of profit, or a term you'll hear a lot is seller discretionary earnings, which is SDE. What seller discretionary earnings is basically the profit plus some additional owner benefits, right? The owner salary, or, if you have an online business and you run your car through it, your online business doesn't really need your car to operate it, right? So it's really just more of an owner benefit. It's a seller discretionary expense.
Right.
You're typically valuing these on the last 12 months, right? So, if it's January, you're looking at, December through January of the previous year. If it's June, you're looking at May of this year, all the way through June of last year. And you're basically going to come up with that number. And for simple math, let's say that number is $100,000. Okay. Different industries will have different multiples, and you're typically going to get a multiple on that SDE, or that seller discretionary earnings. So that could be anywhere from 2x to 5x, which is typically it is. So if your business is making $100,000, it's probably going to fall in the range of $200,000 to $500,000 in terms of your exit price. And you could have additional things on top of there, such as inventory, or if you've got additional assets and a truck that you need. And I would say most local businesses are going to fall in that same realm too. Now, that's kind of like businesses are going well, they're growing, they're normal. There's a whole different conversation we can dive into, and maybe we don't have time for that, Curtis, of, distressed businesses that aren't doing very well. Those are businesses that's a kind of a completely different conversation, and there's more complicated structure with seller notes and earnouts. But yeah, there's when you think about,
we got to have that conversation too, because that's really, it's a lot. It's a big topic, but I would like, all right, let's do distressed businesses, because it's like real estate, right? You want to call it don't want her, somebody that's got problems, and you're solving their problems by taking that property off their hands. So it's that, but you need to go in and know how to create value. Back to your point, it's really all about solving problems.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I look at for any business that I'm looking to acquire is I instantly try to identify underutilized assets. And let me give you some examples of what underutilized assets could be with different businesses. One example is you have a business that has 10,000 emails, or it collects 2,000 emails a month, but they're not doing any email marketing. They don't have the right eCommerce emails set up. They don't have the right tracking set up. To me, that's actually a really good growth opportunity that is really common with online businesses. Offline businesses could be, and this is super common, is they don't pick up the phone, right? So they might get 30 or 40 phone calls in a day, but they just don't have enough people to answer the phone calls and staff them, right? And so if you hired someone else to handle some of that calls, you might be able to grow that business 20, 30, 40%, which absolutely offsets the cost of hiring someone for an additional 20 or 30 hours a week to handle the phone call. So those are kind of underutilized assets that they're already in the business. They already exist. Just the current owner isn't capitalizing on them or doesn't know how to. But, I'm going to caveat that too, Curtis, that when you do look at a business for sale and you say, oh, it's so easy, why don't they just do X, Y, and Z? Sellers aren't dumb. If it was easy, they would do it themselves. So sometimes not as easy as it looks. But when you go look at these things, and the way to start identifying underutilized assets is it's a muscle. It's a exercise you have to do with your brain. And as you start to walk into any single business, could be the local restaurant that's selling tacos, it could be, the landscape company, it could be an online business, start to think, what else could they do here? Or what else do they have access here? What else can they sell here to their existing clientele? You'll notice very quickly, Curtis, as you look for companies to acquire, these things will kind of seep out from all the noise. And instantly you'll say, hey, I can look at a business in a minute or two, and I can tell you 4 or 5 things that, hey, these are assets that are already in the business, but they're not using them correctly. Yes.
That's a muscle that you've got to develop. One of the things I'll give people as a book I read called The Starting Point by Dave Maxwell. And so one of the things he said is that a business is really at the core 3 things: a customer, a mechanism, and a result. And so one of the exercises he said is just to look at commercials, look at a business, do just you said. What is the customer? What is their process? What's the mechanism? And what a result are they selling? And you start to train your brain to look for stuff, and you'll start to see stuff that I do. My wife and I do it all the time. Oh, we just went to this restaurant. You know, it was great. They didn't even ask for our email. How can they, Karen, you know, so so now they're just random, whoever comes in. But if you Dan Kennedy calls it future banking. If you got my email, you could make sure I came back in, because you could get my birthday and send me a free entree, and I'm not going to go to dinner by myself. So now I can bring 2 or 3 people with me, and you're going to get all their email, but that's to me, it was a nice restaurant. That's basic, like easy stuff that you could do to guarantee future money. And so it seems basic, but they don't do it.
Yeah, you nailed it. It seems basic. And some of it is simple wins like that, where you're really just jumping in and putting in some systems in place to be able to do that. It's really common online to actually collect a lot of data about people and then not use the data, right? You don't use their email to reach out to them, give them updates, get them product tips, those types of things. And then a perfect example is you've got a restaurant not collecting fully, or, I look at my pest control guy, right? He comes to my house. I don't know where he's driving from, but he's probably driving all over the county. He should just, honestly, all he needs to do is ask me, hey, can you introduce me to your neighbors, and I'll give you a $10 gift card to whatever taco place on the corner. And I'm like, sure, I'll do that. But he never asks. And so I could have him, I could get him this whole street if I wanted to, because I know everybody here. Right. So, a lot of it's just these simple things that, as you get into running a business and you're just kind of feel like you're always, drowning and you're barely staying afloat. If you stop and think a little bit about, hey, most of the pest control expense is actually him driving and wasting time to drive to my house. What if he had 5 houses to do on my street? And so he was done for the whole morning, and then he didn't have to keep driving across town. So anyways, as you're thinking about these businesses to acquire, you start looking at, hey, what are they not doing? And what is like the really obvious things they need to start doing?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so tell me about this, what are your sales? And you could kind of get some of the stuff you're looking for just in a conversation. You think that's possible?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know if I've got a list, but happy to provide some materials for you. Mm-hmm. But I would say that the very first thing when you look at a company is, do you want to run that company, right? There's completely different directions, whether it makes a lot of money or it loses money, right? Or it doesn't make any money. Those are kind of in the same category.
Yeah.
And as you're approaching that, you're kind of approaching it as, is this a turnaround project? I don't do a lot of those. I have some close friends that have just slayed it with turnaround projects. That's really not my thing. I want to buy something that's not broken because I don't want to break it, But I think if you're looking at something that is a turnaround project, you're typically not going to pay very much for it, or you're not going to pay anything for it. And there's going to be a seller note, and you're going to say, hey, I'm going to take over your gym. It's losing money, but I'll pay you 10% of revenue for the next 12 months. Mm-hmm. And you'll make more money now than you will if you just fold up the business and move on. Okay. So that's kind of the extreme example of a gym maybe not making any money. On the flip side of it, maybe a business is making money. The due diligence you're going to want to do there is just understand, how does it make money? What business is it really in? You want to understand any of the bottlenecks that could be in there, right? And I say bottlenecks is if you have an e-commerce company and you only have one supplier, well, what happens when that supplier's factory burns up, or a ship gets stuck in the Suez Canal and you can't get your products here, or you there's a variety of things that can happen if you only have one supplier. So there's supplier concentration risk. Another common one that people don't think about is actually customer concentration. If you have one customer that's 80% of your revenue, what happens if that customer leaves, right? Or, if the, anything.
I think about that all the time. That is like, Dan K said, one is the worst word in business. So I'll talk to clients that have like a lot of their money coming from government contract, like 90% of their revenue comes from government contracts. I'm like, oh, that would terrify me. That's like,
that's gonna keep you up at night.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. And they can not pay you, or you could lose. I've known people that have had a $500,000 contract and they were living good, and over a dispute, they went to zero, like in a week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's it's really common. So anything that's above 10% in terms of if there's one customer who's got more than 10% of your revenue, or that accounts for it, then I would, be careful about that, right? That, we talked about those multiples. If any of these things don't check out, that multiple is going to come down because you don't want to overpay for something, or you're going to tie it into like a seller note or earn out, right? Because those are just things you need to worry about. I had a friend who bought a company, and not the largest customer, but one of the largest customers was the previous owner's sister-in-law. Well, what happened when he took over the business? She left and took her business to another friend, right? So those are all questions you got to worry about and ask about as you are looking into it. So the due diligence side of things, you're really just understanding what the question is, what could go wrong, right? And it could be customers, it could be supplier risk. It could be, if you're just on Amazon, what happens if Amazon shuts down your account? Or what if you're 100% tied to Facebook ads? Or, if you've got a local business and everything revolves around the general manager, well, if you take over that business, is that general manager going to walk over to you and say, hey, I know how to run this business. I built this business for the last 10 years. I need a 50% increase in raise, right? I need a 50% increase in money. So you kind of need to think about all the downsides that can happen and make sure as you're approaching this, you feel comfortable with those risks, or you have at least identified them and figured out a way to structure your business and your comfort level around those risks.
That's great. Yeah, there's a lot to think about. I mean, it's a great opportunity, but business is, there's skill sets there. So it's not, because everybody wants like, oh, I want passive income. You got to have active income before it becomes passive income, which means
I love that.
You got to learn to do something.
Well, I would say too, Curtis, buying a business is the least form of passive income you can do.
I know that's right. Yeah.
If you want passive income, you should go buy some dividend paying stocks. That's what I recommend. Or go buy some government bonds. This is not a financial advice, because nobody should listen to me for financial advice. But, from a passive standpoint, the most active form of investment is actually buying a business. It can also mean incredible returns, but you're definitely not, doing a mailbox check and checking your mailbox on the first of the month.
Yeah, see, that's the point is, I don't want people looking for that, right? I think if you look at the Forbes 400, what do? They build businesses and then they buy real estate with their profits, in general. And so to me, your fastest path to cash is business. And then, what's exciting is that you don't have to go out and start it from scratch. You can go out and buy customers and some cash flow already in place. And you just have to figure out, which is you learning a little about marketing operations, that kind of stuff, how you can analyze stuff and how can you improve it. Just like for my apartment building, or my not wholesalers, but the people that buy real estate below market, make improvements and then, get the value up, cash your money back out, and keep the rents coming in. It's a similar process. It's just a different asset class, but it's still work and it still takes your skill set. But guess what? It takes skills to get rich, right? It takes money. I mean, I'm sorry to tell you, it's work. That's why most people don't want to do it. They want to just max out their 401k. Well, all right. It's Uncle Dave if you want.
Yeah. You move with Uncle Dave. That's great.
Right.
I'm going to steal that one. So, I think when you think about there's a lot of paths to wealth, right? And there isn't one cut and dry, Curtis did it this way, somebody else did it that way. There's not just one path, because everybody's coming to the table with different skill sets and different goals. And those goals are always changing. a couple of years ago, I didn't have any kids. Now I have 3 kids. And it's like, okay, well, my goals are totally different as a father than I was when I was, married, but didn't have any kids. Right. So I think it's okay to approach business as this ever evolving thing. But I think it's also important too, to Curtis, to realize you don't need to look at anybody else and compare yourself to anybody else or what they're doing. And so just because my friend bought, an X amount of business, that means I need to do the same too. Right. I think the exact opposite is, I don't really care what he's doing. I can learn from what he's doing, but I don't need to replicate exactly what he's doing. And so if people are out there saying, I want to maximize my 401k, that's fantastic. Go out and do an awesome job and do that. And, go about it that way. If people are, I want to build a business that can make an extra $1,000 a month if I just work Saturdays, that's fantastic. That's a great path for them too. So I think there's really ways to approach it that fit in line with everybody's goals. And it's important to realize the race that you're running is very different than everybody else's race. And you're starting at different points in your own races. You know, some people are, they get the golden spoon when they're born, and other people like they're grinding and other people, they immigrate to different countries. And so we're all starting at different stages. And so I think that's it, and it might be, I don't know if there's a better way or different way other than you kind of just have to accept extreme responsibility and say, hey, these are my goals. This is what I focus on. And this is what I'm going to run after. And that's whether you're buying a business, starting a business, the size, it doesn't matter what anybody else is doing. Pick and learn from what everybody else is doing. And then, put your own spin on it, your own flavor, so that it applies to you and your own goals and your own family and life.
I love that. That's what I told people when my kids were running track. I used to say, run your race. Don't worry about, if they were running 400, I said, listen, you just got to trust your training. Don't worry about the staggers. You've got to run your race. So you at the first corner, you do this, and then you stretch it out in the straightaway, keep your form, hit the corner hard. And then we come into the final 100, trust your training, and then just run your race. But don't run around looking, from side to side. Where is so-and-so? Don't worry about that. You just got to do the best that you can do. And you train for it and trust that your body will respond when that lactic acid kicks in, at the last 100 meters.
Sports fan. Yeah. And I love that kind of that like story you told there, that example, because sports, losing weight, all these different things that are goal oriented are incredibly similar to business. I run ultra marathons. I run, really long races in the mountains, and it's just something I love. It's very therapeutic. It's almost a meditation for me. But I never win. I'm not fast. I'm always like middle of the pack. And there's always, some gazelle out there who's like, 6'4" and $150, and they just run like crazy. To me, it's like, I'm running my own race. I know what my body can handle and what I can push it to. And I kind of do my thing, and I love it. And it's really fun. But I think that's a similar mindset we have with business, and whether you're building.
And I get that from sports. I tell people when I coach, you got to have the will to prepare to win. Right. And so before we recorded, we started talking about the 12-week year. And so what you want. So like, for example, one of the sports I don't love sitting there watching it, but I love track. I love swimmers, because swimmers could come in last place, but if they PR and get their personal record, they're ecstatic. And I love that mentality that, you just got to run your race. You got to get a little incrementally better. It doesn't matter what they're doing. Are you getting better? And you can totally transfer that to business. Are you growing and see, you don't even focus on money. You need to focus on the activity or the key performance indicators that lead to money, because money follows value. See, most people are focused on the money. You have to focus on the problems you're solving or the value that you're creating in the marketplace. That's is where money comes from, creating value in the marketplace, serving your fellow man. And I think that if you, look at what you're talking about, and all right, how can I serve more people? You just got to ask different questions. How can I serve more people at a higher level? Can I help this business serve more people at a higher level, more often? And just start to play with that. I think that is so cool. That's what you're talking about. And
you what you're saying kind of reminds me of too. You mentioned Dan Kennedy. I know there's a quote somewhere floating around that you're supposed to measure the gain and not the gap. And I think that's an important thing to think about, is you can't measure someone else's gain and someone else's gap, right? If I'm running my race, I'm measuring how much better I am than I was yesterday, how much better I am was last month and last year. In my last race, am I doing better? And so you can measure the gap of where I want to be, in whether it's wealth or business or losing weight. and you could just be miserable till you hit it, or maybe you never hit it and you're just miserable there. Or you can measure, hey, I'm halfway there. Look how far I've come, right? I've come halfway. I'm ecstatic about that. I'm going to continue to run through with that. You had brought up a book. I think, one of the best books I've read in the space in terms of buying companies, Curtis, is actually a book called Buy Then Build by Walker Deibel. And it's the book I wish I would have read. It came out 3 or 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I know Walker personally. He's fantastic. And he's an incredible entrepreneur. He's bought several, 7 businesses in 10 years or something crazy like that. And it's a wonderful book, Buy Then Build, and you can get it on Amazon or wherever like that. And that's probably the best book out there that covers online, offline, and just the whole structure of how to go about and how someone should approach their search to buy a company.
Wow. Yeah, I saw that. I'm gonna buy it because I remember looking for it. I wasn't looking for it, but it popped up. So now I'm gonna get it. So I know, Ryan, I appreciate you spending some time with us. I want to be respectful of that. Anything that words of wisdom or anything that I didn't ask you that you wish I've asked you that you want to get out as we close, and then I want you to tell them how to check out what you're doing. Yeah,
absolutely. So I would say the Buy Then Build is a great starting place. If this is a brand new concept for you for buying a company, I don't have an MBA. I don't have a private equity background. I'm all self-taught. It's school of hard knocks. I've reached out to mentors and really focused on who can I learn from in books and gravitated to all that. But I don't think you have to have professional training or, go back and get your MBA or anything like that. Right. So that's what I would say is this seems very far off for people listening if this is the first concept, but it doesn't need to be as far off as people think they are. More people are qualified to take over an existing business that is profitable and doing well and continue to do great things with it. So Buy Then Build is what I'd recommend. You can also reach out to me on Twitter, Ryan Paul Condie, Condie. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. So I'm all things business acquisitions. I have a podcast called Let's Buy a Business. I've told my story on there. I do short episodes, and then I also do some interviews. So it's kind of a two-step format. The short episodes are about 7 minutes long, where I'll dive into one specific thing about buying a company, how to do diligence or how to reach out to a company for sale, how to do certain things. And then I also do interviews of people who've actually acquired companies, exited companies, to just understand how that process works. So Let's Buy a Business. You can find it on any other, wherever you get your podcasts.
All right. We're going to put that in the show notes, and I'm going to check that out myself, because now so y'all got my mind on it.
Yeah, I just ruined your afternoon. You're going to be thinking about buying a company.
I will be. It's like, because it's funny. That excites me more than learning how to buy like an apartment building. You know what I mean? Like in terms of, because I'm a second, third, my grandfather, father, third generation business owner, growing up in retail and brick and mortar supermarket, the bar business here in Philly. And my dad was like more of a turnaround specialist, right? We started stuff from scratch, and people would bring him, bars where they failed, and he would, he was a good operator, and then he would turn them around. So I kind of learned that, but I didn't like that business, but I liked the idea. I think he enjoyed the idea of starting it and then get it up and running and getting it profitable. So that's, and I would say, like, tell me about some real estate. He would go, what am I going to do with $800 a month? He said, I can get the business. This is early 90s, right? He said, I can get the business and make $5,000 a week, and have a property. And so that has never left me. We should.
You're preaching to the choir. Yeah, right. That's what I believe too.
And really, we should have done both. Okay. Because we're in a retail business where it was very unfriendly in the city for like the tavern and the bar business. So we should have been doing both. So I'm trying to make sure that it's like rowing a boat. You got two oars. You can't just have one oar. Maybe you can, but I like them. I like your way. So I like how you think. I would love to have another conversation another day on distressed business. I think that relates another good half hour or so on its own, because I think that's a fascinating topic. But Ryan, my brother, I appreciate you. So,
thanks for having me on, Curtis. It's been fun. Yes. We'll do a second one with distressed businesses. That's a fun topic. And there's a distressed business within 1 mile of every single person listening to this episode. So
think about it. All right. Good stuff. Ryan, thank you so much. And y'all go out there and make sure you check out his podcast. And if you like this episode, give us a review. So listen, like, and share. And y'all have a great day out.
Thanks for listening to Practical Wealth. To access the show notes and resources, go to practicalwealthshow.com. To get your questions on the show, go to practicalwealthshow.com. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Before you make any investment decisions, consult a professional. This show is copyrighted by Practical Wealth. Written permission must be granted.